Welcome to Dream Tales Sleep Stories. Tonight's reading is The Coin That Crossed the Ocean. Settle into your bed or sofa and let your shoulders, jaw, and eyelids grow heavy. Inhale slowly, 1, 2, 3, and sigh the air away, allowing the day to fade into quiet dark. With every soft inhale, you invite fresh English phrases. With every gentle exhale, stray thoughts drift farther off. Behind my voice flows a gentle melody, renowned for guiding the mind toward deep relaxation. Keep your eyes closed or follow the captions, whichever feels right. Simply receive the rhythm and resonance of the language. Deep in rest, tonight's phrases will take root like seeds, ready to bloom into stronger English skills with the morning light. When you feel settled, hold that unhurried breath and allow yourself to drift into the tale. The coin that crossed the ocean begins now, and when the story's final line has faded, the music will linger a little longer, carrying you gently deeper into sleep. The coin that crossed the ocean. I remember the moment I was born. It was not like the birth of a human child, with warmth and crying and the smell of skin. My birth was violent and loud. There was the roar of a furnace, the heat of melting copper, and then the tremendous pressure of a steel die slamming down upon me with the force of a giant's fist. In that single crushing instant, I was given my face and my name. On one side, they pressed the image of a harp, the ancient symbol of Ireland. On the other, they stamped the profile of a young queen who sat on a throne far away in London, a queen who had never set foot on Irish soil and never would. It was the spring of 1845, and I was a single penny, freshly struck at the Royal Mint's Dublin branch. I was bright and new, my copper surface gleaming like a tiny sunset. If you had held me up to the light that day, you would have seen your own face reflected in my shine, distorted and strange, like a face seen through water. They put me in a cloth bag with hundreds of my brothers and sisters, all of us clinking and chattering against one another in the darkness. We were carried on a cart through the cobblestone streets of Dublin, past the grand buildings of Trinity College, past the River Liffey with its green-brown water, past the beggars who sat on the bridge with their hollow eyes and outstretched hands. Even then, in the spring of 1845, there were many beggars in Dublin, but nobody knew yet what was coming. Nobody could have imagined the horror that the next few years would bring. They delivered us to the Bank of Ireland, that great stone building with its columns and its air of permanent authority. And from there, I began my journey through the world. A clerk counted me out and placed me in a merchant's hand, and the merchant carried me in his waistcoat pocket to a shop on Grafton Street, and the shopkeeper gave me his change to a woman buying thread, and the woman dropped me into a tin box she kept on her kitchen shelf. That was where my first real story began, in that tin box, in a small cottage in County Cork, in the hands of a man named Padraig O'Donnell. Padraig was a farmer, though that word perhaps gives too grand an impression. He had a small plot of land, barely 2 acres, on a hillside that faced the sea. The soil was thin and rocky, and the wind blew constantly from the Atlantic, carrying salt and rain. But Padraig was a strong man, with large, rough hands and a gentle voice, and he worked that land with all the patience and devotion of a man who loved the earth beneath his feet. He had a wife named Bridget, who was small and quick and laughed easily, and 2 children, a boy of 7 called Sean, and a girl of 4 called Aoife. They lived in a stone cottage with a thatched roof, and they kept a pig and a few chickens. And in the evenings, Bridget would sing old songs while Padraig mended his tools by the fire. Their life depended on one thing above all others: potatoes. Like most of the poor families in Ireland, the O'Donnells grew potatoes on almost every inch of their land. They ate potatoes for breakfast, for lunch, and for dinner. Potatoes with butter when times were good. Potatoes with salt when times were hard. Potatoes boiled, potatoes mashed, potatoes roasted in the ashes of the fire. Padraig kept me in the tin box with a few other coins, his entire savings, hidden behind a loose stone in the wall of the cottage. Sometimes, late at night, when the children were sleeping and Bridget was at her spinning wheel, he would take the box down and count us carefully, his lips moving silently as he added up his modest wealth. He was saving for something, though I did not yet know what. Then the blight came. It arrived in September of 1845, carried on the wind, invisible and merciless. One morning, the potato fields were green and healthy. By the following week, the leaves had turned black. A terrible smell rose from the earth, the smell of decay and death, and when Padraig pulled the potatoes from the ground, they were soft and rotten, falling apart in his hands like wet paper. I could not see his face from inside the tin box, but I heard his voice that night, speaking to Bridget in a whisper that shook with fear. "They are all gone," he said. "Every one of them, black and rotten. What will we do, Bridget? What in God's name will we do?" The winter that followed was the hardest the O'Donnells had ever known. They ate what little they could find. They ate the pig. They ate the chickens. Bridget made soup from nettles and wild herbs. The children grew thin, their eyes too large for their faces, their arms like sticks. All across County Cork and all across Ireland, the same scene was repeated in thousands of cottages. People were starving. Padraig took me out of the tin box and held me in his palm. I felt the roughness of his skin, the trembling of his hand. He walked 3 miles to the nearest town and spent me on a small bag of oatmeal, the last food he could afford. He placed the oatmeal in Bridget's hands as though it were gold. And so I left the O'Donnell family and entered the world again, passed from the shopkeeper to another customer, and then to another. I moved through a landscape of suffering. Every hand that held me was thinner than the last. Every face I glimpsed was marked with hunger and despair. Ireland was dying, and I was a witness to its agony, a small copper disc moving through the pockets of the doomed. It was almost a year later when I found myself in the possession of a young woman named Mary Brennan. Mary was 19 years old, with dark hair and pale blue eyes, and a determination that burned like a quiet flame inside her. She had lost her parents to the famine, and her younger brother to the typhus that followed it. She was alone in the world, with nothing but the clothes on her back, and a small leather purse containing a handful of coins, of which I was one. Mary had made a decision. She was going to America. The idea of America floated through the starving villages of Ireland like a dream, like a prayer whispered in the darkness. America, where there was land enough for everyone. America, where no one went hungry. America, where a person could start again, could become someone new. The letters that came back from those who had already gone spoke of wages and work and freedom. And though some of those letters told darker stories too, stories of hardship and prejudice, the desperate people of Ireland heard only the hope. Mary walked to the port of Cobb, which the English called Queenstown, a journey of 2 days on foot. She slept one night in a ditch by the road, wrapped in a thin shawl, with the stars above her and the sound of the sea growing closer with every mile. When she arrived at the port, she saw the ships. They were tall-masted sailing vessels, their hulls dark and weather-beaten, and they sat in the harbor like enormous wooden birds waiting to take flight. She bought her ticket with every coin she had. I remember the moment she placed me on the ticket agent's counter. The sound I made against the wood, the brief touch of her cold fingers releasing me. The ticket cost £3.10, which was all the money Mary possessed in the world. It bought her a place in steerage, the cheapest and worst part of the ship, deep below the waterline, where the air was thick and the light was dim, and the wooden bunks were packed so closely together that you could hear every cough, every prayer, every sob of your neighbors. The ship was called the Donahue, and she sailed on a gray morning in March of 1847. Mary stood on the deck as the shore of Ireland grew smaller and smaller behind her. She did not cry. She had used up all her tears already. She simply watched until the green hills disappeared into the mist, and then she turned her face toward the west, toward the unknown, toward America. I was no longer in Mary's possession by then. The ticket agent had passed me to a shipping clerk, and the shipping clerk had dropped me into a cash box. And there I sat for several weeks, listening to the sounds of the port, the calling of gulls, the creak of ropes, the splash of waves against the harbor wall. But I would cross that ocean soon enough. Everything in Cobb was moving westward in those years, even the coins. A merchant sailor named Thomas Gray carried me across the Atlantic in his trouser pocket. Thomas was an Englishman from Liverpool, a quiet, weathered man of about 40, who had spent more of his life at sea than on land. He had picked me up as part of his change in a tavern near the Cobb docks, and he kept me with a few other coins in a small leather pouch tied to his belt. The crossing took 6 weeks. 6 weeks of rolling gray water, of winds that howled like hungry wolves, of waves that rose like mountains and crashed down upon the deck with a sound like thunder. The Donahue was not a large ship, and she groaned and shuddered in the storms as though she might break apart at any moment. Thomas had made this crossing many times before, and he knew its dangers well. The icebergs that drifted down from the north, the fog banks that could hide a rocky shore until it was too late, the sudden squalls that could snap a mast like a twig. Below decks, in steerage, the passengers suffered terribly. More than 300 people were crammed into a space designed for half that number. Disease spread quickly. By the second week, typhus had appeared, and by the fourth week, people were dying. They buried them at sea. Thomas watched from the rigging as the bodies, wrapped in canvas, were slipped over the side and disappeared into the dark water. These ships had earned a name among the Irish. They called them coffin ships, and the name was well-deserved. I felt the rhythm of the ocean through Thomas's body, the constant rocking that became as natural as breathing. And I felt something else too, something harder to describe. It was as though the ocean itself were alive, vast and indifferent, and ancient beyond measuring, and we were nothing more than a splinter of wood carrying our cargo of human hope and suffering toward a distant shore. On the 42nd day, Thomas climbed to the top of the mainmast and saw land. He called down to the deck, and a great cheer rose from the sailors and the passengers alike. People who had been lying sick in their bunks found the strength to climb the ladders and stand on deck, squinting into the sunlight, searching the horizon for their first glimpse of the new world. New York appeared slowly, like a painting being revealed one brushstroke at a time. First, the low green line of Long Island, then the hills of Brooklyn, then the harbor itself, crowded with ships of every size, their masts as thick as a forest of bare winter trees. And rising above it all, the spires and rooftops of Manhattan, gleaming in the afternoon light. Thomas Gray stepped onto the dock at South Street Seaport and headed straight for a tavern, as sailors always did after a long crossing. He ordered a glass of whiskey and paid with the coins in his pouch, and that was how I left his company and arrived in America. New York in 1847 was a city of noise and movement and overwhelming energy. The streets were packed with people of every kind, merchants and laborers, gentlemen in tall hats and beggars in rags, women carrying baskets and children running barefoot between the horse-drawn carriages that clattered endlessly over the cobblestones. The tavern keeper passed me on as change to an Irish laborer named Patrick, who worked on the construction of a warehouse near the docks. Patrick was one of thousands of Irish immigrants who had arrived in New York during the famine years, desperate for any kind of work. They built the roads and the railways and the buildings of the growing city, working long hours for low wages, living in crowded tenements on the Lower East Side. Patrick gave me to his wife, who used me to buy milk for their baby from a street vendor on Mulberry Street. The vendor passed me to a fruit seller, and the fruit seller gave me to a young boy who had bought an apple, and the boy dropped me into a fountain in City Hall Park, making a wish as I sank through the clear water and settled on the bottom among dozens of other coins. I lay in that fountain for nearly 3 months, looking up through the water at the distorted sky, at the pigeons that landed on the fountain's rim, at the faces of the people who leaned over to toss their own coins and their own wishes into the water. It was a peaceful time, perhaps the most peaceful I have ever known. A parks worker finally scooped me out, and I was back in circulation. I passed through many hands in the following months, moving through the neighborhoods of New York like a tiny metal traveler. I visited the grand houses of Fifth Avenue and the miserable slums of Five Points. I was held by the soft hands of wealthy women and the calloused hands of dock workers. And everywhere I went, I heard the same word repeated like a heartbeat: opportunity. It was the religion of this new world, and its church was everywhere. The years passed, and I continued my journey through American life. By 1863, the country was tearing itself apart. The Civil War had been raging for 2 years, and the nation was divided by a conflict more terrible and more costly than anyone had imagined it would be. In the North, factories worked day and night, producing weapons and uniforms and supplies. In the South, cities burned and fields lay abandoned. And on the battlefields between them, young men were dying in numbers that defied comprehension. I came into the possession of a Union soldier named James Washington Carter. James was 22 years old, tall and thin, with serious brown eyes and a quiet manner that made him seem older than his years. He was from a small town in Massachusetts, the son of a school teacher and a carpenter, and he had enlisted in the army, not out of any love for war, but out of the deep conviction that slavery was wrong and that the Union must be preserved. James carried me in his breast pocket, along with a folded letter from his mother and a small photograph of his sweetheart, a girl named Elizabeth, who waited for him back in Massachusetts. He had found me on the ground outside his tent one morning and had picked me up, examined my Irish harp and the profile of the young queen, and decided that I was a lucky charm. A coin from across the ocean, he told his friend Samuel, showing me to him by the campfire one evening. She has traveled further than any of us. If she can cross the Atlantic, we can certainly cross Virginia. Samuel laughed at this, but James was serious. He truly believed that I brought him luck, and who am I to say that he was wrong? He carried me through the Battle of Gettysburg in July of 1863, the most terrible battle I have ever witnessed. 3 days of unimaginable violence on the green hills of Pennsylvania. The noise was beyond anything I had experienced since the moment of my creation in the Dublin Mint. The roar of cannons, the crack of rifles, the screams of wounded men and wounded horses, all of it blending together into a continuous wall of sound that seemed to shake the very earth. James survived Gettysburg. He survived the long march south that followed. He survived the winter camps, where disease killed more soldiers than bullets did. He carried me through it all, touching his breast pocket before every engagement, whispering something that might have been a prayer or might have been Elizabeth's name. The war ended in April of 1865. James walked home to Massachusetts with holes in his boots and shadows in his eyes that had not been there before. Elizabeth was waiting for him at the gate of her father's house, and when she saw him coming down the road, she ran to meet him, and they held each other for a long time without speaking. James kept me for many years after the war. He became a teacher, like his mother, at a school in his hometown. He married Elizabeth, and they had 3 children, 2 boys and a girl. In the evenings, he would sometimes take me out of the small wooden box where he kept his war mementos and turn me over in his fingers, staring at me with an expression I could not quite read. Perhaps he was remembering the friends he had lost. Perhaps he was marveling at the strange fortune that had kept him alive when so many others had fallen. Perhaps he was simply grateful. When James died in 1901, at the age of 60, his daughter Clara found me among his belongings. She did not know my history. She did not know about Padraig, or Mary, or Thomas Gray, or the fountain in City Hall Park. She saw only a worn Irish penny, its copper surface darkened with age, its images almost smooth. She put me in a box of miscellaneous items that she sold to a second-hand shop in Boston, and I began another chapter of my long life. The second-hand shop in Boston was a dusty, cluttered place filled with the discarded treasures of other people's lives. Old clocks and chipped china, broken furniture and faded paintings, everything piled together in a glorious confusion that smelled of dust and old wood and forgotten time. I sat in a glass bowl on the counter with dozens of other old coins, gathering dust in the pale light that filtered through the shop's dirty window. It was 1923 when a boy named Marco Benedetti reached into that bowl and picked me up. Marco was 12 years old, the son of Italian immigrants who had come to Boston from Naples in 1910. His father, Giuseppe, ran a small bakery on Hanover Street in the North End, the Italian neighborhood of Boston, where the streets were narrow and the buildings were tall, and the air always smelled of bread and garlic and strong coffee. Marco was fascinated by old things. He collected everything, bottle caps and bird feathers and colored stones from the beach. He had a wooden cigar box under his bed where he kept his most precious finds. And the moment he saw me in Mr. Abernathy's bowl, he knew that I belonged in that box. He paid 2 cents for me, which was all the money he had that day, and he carried me home in his pocket, running through the streets of the North End with the energy and joy that only a 12-year-old boy can possess. "Look, Papa," he said, bursting into the bakery where Giuseppe was kneading dough. "An Irish coin, a real one, from Ireland. Look at the harp." Giuseppe wiped the flour from his hands and took me gently between his thick fingers. He examined me carefully, turning me over, squinting at the worn images. "She is old, this coin," he said in his accented English. "Very old. From before I was born, even. You know, Marco, this coin, she has a story. Everything old has a story." What story, Papa? Giuseppe shrugged his broad shoulders. That I cannot tell you, but you can imagine, yes? Maybe she was carried by a sailor. Maybe she crossed the ocean, like your mama and me. Maybe she has seen things that we will never see. Marco loved this idea. He kept me in his cigar box for years, taking me out sometimes to show his friends, or to hold me up to the light and wonder about my past. He was a dreamer, Marco, a boy who saw magic in ordinary things. And he treated me with a tenderness that I found deeply touching. Of all my many owners, Marco may have been the one who came closest to understanding what I was. Not just a piece of metal, but a carrier of stories, a small round vessel filled with the memories of everyone who had ever held me. Marco grew up and joined his father in the bakery. He married a girl named Rosa, and they had 4 children, and the bakery became Benedetti and Son, famous in the North End for its bread and its cannoli. Marco kept me in his cigar box all through the roaring 20s, through the years of jazz music and dancing and the intoxicating belief that prosperity would never end. But prosperity did end. In October of 1929, the stock market crashed, and the world changed overnight. The Great Depression hit the Benedetti family hard. People still needed bread, but fewer and fewer could afford to pay for it. Giuseppe, now old and frail, watched with sad eyes as the line of customers grew shorter each week. Marco worked longer hours for less money, and Rosa learned to make meals from almost nothing, stretching a single chicken into 3 days of soup. In the autumn of 1931, Marco had to make a terrible decision. The rent on the bakery was due, and he did not have enough money to pay it. He gathered together everything of value that the family possessed, which was very little, and took it to a pawn shop on Washington Street. Among the items he brought was his cigar box of treasures. The pawnbroker, a thin man with spectacles and an expression of permanent disappointment, looked through the box with little interest. "Junk," he said, pushing it back across the counter. "Old buttons and foreign coins. I will give you 10 cents for the lot." Marco hesitated. These were his childhood treasures, the collection of a lifetime of curiosity and wonder. But the rent was due, and his children needed shoes for the winter. He took the 10 cents and walked out of the shop without looking back. The pawnbroker put the cigar box on a shelf in the back room, where it sat undisturbed for months. I lay in the darkness of that box, surrounded by Marco's other treasures, and I thought about all the hands that had held me, all the stories that had unfolded around me since that violent day in the Dublin Mint. In the spring of 1932, a child knocked the cigar box off the shelf while playing in the back room of the pawn shop. The box hit the floor and burst open, scattering its contents across the dusty floorboards. Buttons rolled under shelves, feathers floated in the air, and I, small and dark and easily overlooked, slipped through a crack between 2 boards and fell into the space beneath the floor, and there I stayed. The world above me continued to turn. The depression ended. Another war came and went, a war even larger and more terrible than the one James Carter had fought in. Presidents were elected and assassinated. Men walked on the moon. The pawn shop closed and became a grocery store. And the grocery store closed and became a laundromat. And the laundromat closed and became an empty building with boarded-up windows and a locked door. Through all of this, I lay in the darkness under the floor, silent and still, slowly becoming part of the earth itself. Dust covered me. Cobwebs wrapped around me. A mouse built a nest near me one winter and raised her babies within inches of my sleeping form. Seasons changed above me, snow and rain and sunshine, but in my underground chamber, time had stopped. I was forgotten, and in my forgetting, I found a kind of peace. Decades passed, 60 years, 70, 80. In the summer of 2019, a young woman named Sophia Chen knelt on the floor of the old building on Washington Street and carefully scraped away the dirt between the floorboards with a small metal tool. Sophia was 24 years old, a graduate student in archaeology at Boston University. She had dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, quick, intelligent eyes, and the patient, methodical manner of someone trained to find meaning in the smallest fragments of the past. The building was being demolished to make way for a new apartment complex, and Sophia's professor had arranged for the archaeology department to examine the site before the bulldozers moved in. The building dated from the 1880s, and there was a chance that artifacts from earlier periods might be found beneath the floors and in the walls. Sophia had been working for 3 hours, carefully documenting every nail and scrap of wood and fragment of pottery she found, when her tool struck something small and hard. She brushed away the dirt and saw a glint of dark copper. Her heart beat a little faster, the way it always did when she found something unexpected. She picked me up with tweezers, held me close to her face, and blew the dust from my surface. "Professor Davis," she called across the room, "I have found something." Professor Davis, a gray-haired man with a kind face and wire-rimmed glasses, crossed the room and took me from Sophia's tweezers. He examined me under a magnifying glass, turning me over carefully. "Irish penny," he said, "Victorian era, mid-19th century, judging by the design. Remarkable condition, considering where she has been." He looked at Sophia with raised eyebrows. "Do you know what this means?" Sophia nodded. "It means someone from the Irish immigration period was here, or at least their money was." "Exactly. This coin tells a story, Sophia. She has been lying here, waiting to be found, waiting to tell her story for perhaps 80 or 90 years, maybe longer." He placed me gently in Sophia's palm. "Clean her up carefully. Document everything. She deserves to be treated with respect." Sophia took me back to the university laboratory, where she spent an entire afternoon cleaning me with tiny brushes, removing the grime of decades without damaging my surface. As she worked, she talked to me in a soft voice, the way people sometimes talk to animals or objects they are caring for. "Where have you been?" she whispered. "Who held you? What did you see?" She could not know the answers. She could not know about Podrick counting his savings by firelight, or Mary handing over her last coins for a ticket to America, or James Carter clutching his breast pocket before the Battle of Gettysburg, or Marco Benedetti showing me to his father in the flour-dusted bakery. She could only hold me in her careful hands and wonder, but wondering, I have learned, is a form of knowing. When Sophia imagined the lives I might have touched, she was not wrong. She was reaching across time, across the silence of lost years, and touching something true. A coin that crossed the ocean, a small piece of metal that connected one world to another, one century to another, one human story to the next. Sophia wrote a paper about me and the other artifacts found at the site. She wove together the coins and buttons and fragments of pottery into a narrative of immigrant life in Boston, a story of hope and hardship, of dreams pursued and dreams deferred. Her professor said it was the best paper he had read that year. Today, I rest in a glass case in a small museum in Boston, a museum dedicated to the history of immigration in America. A small card next to me reads, "Irish penny circa 1845, found during archaeological excavation of 147 Washington Street, Boston, 2019, believed to have been carried to America during the Great Famine period. It is a modest description, and it captures only the smallest fraction of my story. But that is the nature of history, is it not? We can only ever know a fragment, a single page torn from a book of thousands. The rest we must imagine, or accept that it is lost. People come to look at me sometimes. Most of them glance at me for a moment and move on. But occasionally, someone pauses, someone leans closer, someone looks at me with an expression I recognize, the expression of a person who is wondering, who is trying to feel the weight of all the years and all the stories that a single small object can contain. A child pressed her hand against the glass yesterday and asked her mother, "Was this coin real money? Did someone really use it?" "Yes," her mother said, "a long time ago in Ireland, and then someone brought it here to America." "Why?" The mother smiled. "Because that is what people do. They carry things with them when they travel. Small things, things that remind them of home." The child stared at me for a long time, her breath making a circle of fog on the glass. And in that moment, I felt something I had not felt in a very long time. I felt seen, not just looked at, but truly seen, recognized as what I am, not a piece of metal, not a museum exhibit, not a relic of a dead economy, but a witness, a silent witness to the extraordinary journey of ordinary people. I have been held by the hands of the desperate and the hopeful, the poor and the brave. I have crossed an ocean and a continent. I have survived a famine and a war and a depression and 8 decades of darkness under a wooden floor. I have been saved and spent and lost and found. And through it all, I have carried something that no amount of corrosion or time can ever wear away. The memory of every person who ever held me, even for a moment, even without knowing my name. The museum is quiet now. The visitors have gone home. The lights have been dimmed, and the glass cases glow softly in the darkness. Outside, the city of Boston hums its endless song, a song made up of 1,000,000 individual lives, 1,000,000 individual stories, all of them connected in ways that no one can fully understand. I am tired. I have been awake for a long time, for almost 200 years, and I think I have earned my rest. The glass case is warm and still, and the velvet cushion beneath me is softer than any pocket I have ever known. The harp on my surface has faded almost to nothing, but if you look closely, very closely, you can still see its outline, the ancient symbol of a green island across the sea, the place where my story began. I close my eyes, if a coin can be said to have eyes, and I let the silence settle over me like a blanket. And in that silence, I dream. I dream of Padraig counting his coins by firelight. I dream of Mary standing on the deck of the Donegal, watching Ireland disappear into the mist. I dream of Thomas Gray climbing the mainmast and calling out, "Land." I dream of James Carter touching his breast pocket before the battle. I dream of Marco showing me to his father in the bakery, and of Giuseppe saying, "Everything old has a story." I dream of Sophia bending over me with her tiny brushes, whispering, "What did you see?" I saw everything, Sophia. I saw it all. And now, at last, I sleep.